All right there, everyone. Macron's approval rating craters as France braces for another round of protests. That's to be talking about on today's video. A huge welcome to all of our new viewers. If this is your first time visiting our channel, I post 2 videos a day analyzing current events in light of conservative trends. So let me encourage you to smack that bell and subscribe button. We are just literally a few thousand subscribers away from the big 100K, and it'll be awesome to have you as a part of our online community where we celebrate all things nationalist, populist, and traditionalist. And like I have said earlier this week, I think we're going to be celebrating more than any of us had ever imagined in our wildest dreams up until now. The latest news coming out of France continues to be utterly dire for Emmanuel Macron. According to the latest YouGov poll, his approval rating as of today has dipped below 20%. Macron is barely clinging to an 18% approval rating. He's only at 18%. There are just no signs that his approval rating's free fall has stopped. I mean, would it not be amazing for him to fall under 10%? Now, keep in mind, Macron's approval rating had been hovering around the mid to low 20s for months before the yellow jacket uprising that erupted a few weeks back. He was already a weak leader, far weaker than anything the corporatist globalist media was portraying him as. Remember when he supposedly rebuked Presidents Trump and Putin at the ceremony commemorating the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, when he scolded the nationalist vision of the world as being selfish and self-centered, and actually made the claim that the millions who died in World War I actually died for globalist values. The corporatist globalist media was so pathetically supportive of Macron. They lauded him as the next great leader of liberal globalist values and a globalist world order that would forever bury nationalism under globalism's inevitable triumph. It turns out it was all a bluff. It was just a big bluff on the part of the so-called mainstream media. Even when the pundits and the liberal media were making such claims, Macron was already extremely unpopular in France, something they barely ever mentioned. But you can only bluff for so long. These yellow jacket protests are proving for all the world to see just how unpopular Macron really is, both from the vantage point of the grievances of the demonstrators themselves and from the vantage point of Macron's utter incompetence in dealing with the situation as well. Richly calling the protesters thugs. Do you remember that? I mean, in a speech before the whole world, Macron defiantly declared that the yellow jacket demonstrators were a bunch of thugs, and they were not going to intimidate Macron from implementing these new fuel taxes that were necessary to transform France into a green energy economy in accordance with the Paris Accords, right? Yeah. These thugs are not going to intimidate me. Yeah, Macron, you're a real tough guy. Isn't it ironic that Macron basically got on his hands and knees begging forgiveness from the very populist forces that got Donald Trump elected in the first place? My, oh my, how the tables have turned. Actually, I'll take that back. Make no mistake. The tables have emphatically not turned. Macron never occupied an inch of high ground when rebuking President Trump and nationalism and populism. That was the invention of the corporatist globalist media. The same corporatist globalist media that is utterly panicked today. We'll be talking about this in a moment. The whole notion that through Macron's leadership, globalism had it triumphantly reasserted the moral high ground over nationalist populism. That just never happened. And Trump knew it, as did Orban and Salvini and Marine Le Pen and countless other nationalist leaders. They all knew it. What's happening in France right now was what these nationalist populist leaders always knew was brewing under the surface. Look, they've read the studies we've talked about here on this channel. They've seen the data that shows a massive political paradigm shift going on all throughout the United States, Europe, indeed throughout the world, that's moving nations decisively to the nationalist populist right and changing the whole global political order. And by the way, Trump seemed to take particular glee in reminding Macron of that when Trump tweeted a congratulations to him for backing down on the fuel taxes, right? Trump said, of course, I made that decision 2 years ago, but hey, better late than never, right? But there's more on top of all this. You have perhaps the most massive demonstrations all being scheduled for this Saturday. The French government's already going to extremes to prevent the protests from getting out of control. It's being reported that more than a dozen armored vehicles would be patrolling the streets of Paris. Gang, just to put all that in perspective, such security measures have not been implemented in Paris, get this, since World War II. Which tells you, of course, that Macron's government knows that the Yellow Vest movement is picking up steam. It's growing beyond anything they really can control at this point. Keep in mind that another poll that just came out found that an overwhelming 73% of French citizens support the demonstration. 73%. That's almost aligns with Macron's disapproval ratings that are now surpassing 80%. Now, folks, you have to understand what's going on here. The corporatist globalists are utterly panicked. They're panicked. I mean, there's just no other way of putting it. If you do your own Google search on what's going on in France right now, you'll see article after article written by committed globalist leftist pundits and journalists who really honestly believe that Macron's presidency is on the brink and that means the end of the global political order as we've known it for decades. Even if he survives all this, Macron will be so politically wounded, who have virtually no clout whatsoever in touting the globalist vision of life. Anytime he opens his mouth about globalism, all we'll see are the yellow jackets and the burning cars and the blocked off roads and the thousands of police officers using pretty brutal tactics to try to control the crowd. And more than that, these pundits and journalists recognize that the far right, as they like to call them, we simply call them the new consensus, right? The new nationalist populism that's rising everywhere in the world today. These liberal pundits see the so-called far right or radical right or extreme right or whatever disparaging term they want to call them. They see them storming the gates. They see that the nationalist right is ready to take charge once Macron falls. And when that happens, that's it. It's done. There's no one else. Merkel's gone. She's toast. She's resigned from her position as CDU leader in Germany, and she's probably going to be replaced by a far more conservative, nationalist-friendly party leader, unless, of course, the CDU wants to commit political suicide. Merkel's gone. Even the EU appears increasingly gone. Remember, the largest group in the European Parliament has just turned to the nationalist populist right as we speak. I'm talking, of course, about the European People's Party, which is the most powerful transnational political party in the EU. The president of the European Council, the president of the European Commission, and the president of the European Parliament are all from the EPP. Well, I don't know how many of you know, but just a few weeks back, the EPP picked the 46-year-old Bavarian Manfred Weber as their new leader. Weber is a solid conservative German leader who's a member of the Christian Social Union in Bavaria. He was backed by none other than Viktor Orban of Hungary and many other nationalist populist leaders. And that's because in many ways, Weber is one of them. He supports working with nationalist populists. He supports a strong law and order agenda. He's a huge advocate for defending Christian values, for maintaining a strong, uniquely European identity. And he's a big critic of globalization and its secularizing effects on Europe. And now, as the leader of the EPP, he's poised to be the next president of the European Commission, which is in many ways the most powerful person in the EU. So needless to say, writing's on the wall. And more of our globalist media elite are recognizing that Macron's collapse means nothing less than the implosion of the globalist world order. For example, again, this is just an example. The latest headline from Bloomberg reads, Macron's defeat in Paris sounds alarm for all of Europe. And this globalist journalist goes on to point out that the political vultures are circling around the French president. There is much at stake for the current globalist world order. You can't go around making speeches defending the international order when 80% of your citizens think you're a fraud. There's no way around that. In fact, we're already seeing comparable protests spreading throughout Belgium and the Netherlands, for heaven's sake. This thing is bigger than anyone ever dreamed. Journalists and pundits are more and more recognizing that this really is it. We really may be seeing the end of the globalist world order and the rise of a new age of nationalist populism that will drive globalists underground for the foreseeable future. It really does appear that we may soon be celebrating far more than any of us ever imagined. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Check out our new online merchandise selection where you can get gear and apparel celebrating all things nationalist and populist and get a special Christmas time discount of 15% off all items by entering the promotion code below. And if you would, please click on our Patreon or PayPal link below and become a supporter of this channel. You know, we are periodically demonetized by YouTube and we could really use your help so we can continue to analyze current events in light of awesome conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish. God bless.